Alright, what's up? This is Lab 83 in which we are using um, basically this pretty cool spreadsheet to compare different companies, and we're comparing Tesla to Ford and General Motors. So right off the bat, we need to compare the ratios, starting off the liquidity ratios. I was actually pretty impressed that Tesla had a higher liquidity ratio, or not a higher, but like I guess I would say higher than I expected liquidity ratio in 2019. I know in Texas, for example, I don't think Tesla was as big in 2019. I know it was really big in California. Now Tesla is like huge. And if you look at the trend, like it's just getting better and better at its ability to pay short-term debts. It even had a higher liquidity ratio than General Motors. Maybe because in 2019 that could be due to the fact that Tesla was one of the few companies in its specific market where a lot of their sales wasn't coming from their cars, they were coming from selling their batteries and stuff. So maybe since they didn't have that many competitors in that field, and with Elon Musk, his engineering probably set himself apart from the competition. Now, financing, I was also surprised by this, that it had a lower debt to equity ratio than Ford and GM. Maybe it's due to it isn't overextending itself at the time. Um, and asset turnover is where Tesla really set itself apart. When you look at asset turnover, receivable turnover, and I think it says over here Tesla's effectiveness in managing assets. So all these ratios, I was actually surprised by how good Tesla was doing in comparison to its competition. The only thing that wasn't as high was its profitability. But I remember it being in the news that Elon was telling people, similar to how Bezos was telling people, that this is more of a long term investment. This isn't like something you're gonna make money off right away, which is evident. Cause I remember investing in Tesla when it was like $200, and like a year later it got up to like 800. I think it peaked at like 1,200. Now it's not doing so hot anymore. Probably should have sold earlier, but you know. Now, how have there been major changes in the ratios over the past 3 years? Or has there been? Actually, looking at return on equity, it was negative zero point 0.5. Now it's down to negative zero point 0.1. I feel like that that's a pretty big change right there. Return on assets, it improved a lot. So like it does seem like Tesla was getting better and better, and by 2019, that's when it really started like not coming to its potential, when people started seeing its potential, if that makes sense. Yeah, its debt to equity was going down too. That's another thing. So like Tesla was definitely like coming to put itself in a position to be a formidable power in the car market. I feel like around this time, because all of the beginning early struggles it was dealing with, it was slowly and slowly starting to overcome them, and you see the profitability, even though it is still not with its competitors, it's definitely getting better. How have they managed short-term liabilities over the past 3 years? So current liabilities, um, it's pretty much grown with its assets. Of course, it's been getting more and more, but they did say over here how they have where is it? They did have pretty decent liquidity ratios. So even though their current liabilities keep getting higher and higher, their ratios show that they're able to pay off their short term debts. And now we need to analyze the profitability, liquidity, financing, and activity. So these right here. So one of its strengths, I guess, is its liquidity ratios compared to its competition. I'm actually surprised it's doing better than Ford and GM. And even with financing, they're doing better than that. So the ability to pay off their debt is actually pretty impressive. We just go to profitability. The profitability is not where Ford and GM is. I'm actually surprised how well GM is doing. Um, but yeah, profitability is not their strength based on these ratios. And I feel like their activity ratios aren't average days in inventory. That's not good. And if you look at their trend for average collection period, it's up and down, which is kind of worrisome. Same thing with receivable turnover. Past 3 years, you can't really get a big snapshot of the company. But I feel like their activity is eh. Their profitability is definitely more concerning. But maybe that's expected with where Tesla was at the time. And if you look at some of their activity ratios, now that I'm looking at it, like receivable turnover, asset turnover, that's actually not that bad. It's actually doing better than the competition. Now we need to consider DuPont framework. So the asset turnover, like I said, was higher than their competition. Return on equity, profit margin, when it speaks for itself. When you look at its comparison, equity multiplier, it's on the same level as GM, and but it's not that consistent. So I'm interested to see how that is doing now. And it has the lowest return on equity. But yeah, like Tesla was a young company at the time, so it's not surprising to see that it's not blowing everybody away, especially in 2019. But I feel like it was in a good space, and I can definitely see why people were like, "Oh, this is the company for the future." I don't know if people still feel that way because just through experience, I feel like people have like not been as optimistic of Tesla as lately, which is evident by the stock price. But in 2019, you did see the potential for this company.